We've got Alice Cooper.
There's a disease, a heart disease, that transforms the patient into some kind of madman.
Lots of cute doggos. 1980s style music videos. A dirty old man. And werewolves, I think. It's Monster Dog, but is it watchable? Thank you, royalty-free audience track, and welcome everybody to Is It Watchable? I'm your host, Paul. If you feel like getting your rock on while having your pants scared off, too bad, because this is Monster Dog. Rock music and horror go together like boogers and the underside of a school bus seat. From the unholy birth of Black Sabbath to the beautifully ghastly album covers of Iron Maiden to the full-on theatrics of Marilyn Manson, rock, especially metal, has always left the sunshine and flowers to pop music while it explored those things your parents didn't want you hearing. And some of those rockers weren't content to just stick with music. Dee Snider of Twisted Sister wrote and starred in the 1998 horror flick Strangeland.
So much flesh, so little time.
And Rob Zombie solidified himself as a horror director with such films as House of a Thousand Corpses, The Devil's Rejects, and the reboot of the Halloween franchise. Which brings us to Alice Cooper, one of the original horror rockers and no stranger to television or movies. But in Monster Dog, he's asked to do the impossible. Carry a movie that is so heavy with suck, no amount of acting chops could budge it. Right away, they allow Alice Cooper to do what he does best. It's a dumb pop song with a terrible music video, but oh my god is it catchy. Cooper is Vince Raven, a famous rock star who, along with his crew, is heading back to his childhood home to shoot a music video of his new song. Vince hasn't been back home in 20 years, so the family caretaker, Joss, who's been there all alone all this time for some reason, prepares for his arrival. But in the middle of making some flimsy-looking sandwiches, he hears some horror movie noises and investigates. Outside, he's greeted by a bunch of bored-looking dogs, and it's implied that something bad happens. Back in the van, Vince and his crew are stopped at a checkpoint by the police. And when you know it, one of the cops recognizes Vince from back in the day.
You sure as hell should remember me.
Sheriff Morrison. Yeah, I remember. I used to sit on your lap and piss all over your pants, right?
That's right, boy. You was more full of water than Hoover Dam.
The cops are apparently stopping people to warn them of mad dogs roaming the area that have already killed 5 people. The description of attacks is so gory it proves too much for sensitive female ears. After the van, or camper as they refer to it in the movie, takes off, the 2 cops hear horror movie noises. Of course they investigate, and one of them winds up dead within about 30 seconds. Next, Vince hits a dog with the camper. The dog looks confused, but otherwise fine. They decide the best thing to do is put it out of its misery by bashing it with a rock. The dog still looks fine. Then a bloodied old man jumps out of nowhere and starts prophesizing.
And all of you will die.
After the old man wanders into the woods, the group hears some ominous growling and Vince and Sandra decide to go in after him. But instead of the old man, they find a monster dog. Then they get in the van and leave. Finally, the group arrives at Vince's house, which, by the way, looks nothing like any type of family residence. Joss the caretaker is nowhere to be found, so Vince decides to grab a rifle and go looking for him. Judging from that dust, I don't think Joss the caretaker has been doing much caretaking. And I still can't believe they're trying to pass this place off as a house. Back in the kitchen, the crew is really loving those sad-looking sandwiches. But not Angela. She's got a bad feeling about this whole thing. In fact, later she has a dream about that creepy old guy from earlier. He warns of the danger they're all in while getting extremely handsy the whole time. When she finally wakes up, everybody gathers round to laugh at what a silly girl she is. Vince, however, doesn't find it so funny. Later, Sandra finds Vince in the library reading about werewolves.
That thing we saw out there was an animal of some kind, not a man.
Listen, werewolves do exist.
Oh, bullshit, Vince. The year 2000 is just around the corner. I am a recognized expert in electronic video.
Ooh, electronic videos. Vince explains that the area has a history of mad dog attacks and how his father was labeled a werewolf and killed by the townspeople. Finally, it's the day of the big video shoot. As the camera's rolling, Angela spots a bloody silhouette in a window above the fireplace, but, being the consummate professional, keeps it to herself as to not ruin the take.
Oh God, it's Joss.
Nothing about that scene makes sense. Who propped up the body against the glass like that? Was it that creepy old man? If so, did he also set up the flashing light behind it? And why did the glass wait until the exact moment that Angela was underneath it to break?
Okay, guys, I want to check out what went on up there. Does anyone want to come along?
Call the cops! Ugh, horror movies. So, while the gang is playing Scooby-Doo, Angela, who was left alone after a murder for some reason, of course goes missing. The crew guns up and Vince insists on looking for Angela by himself.
I'm going outside to look for her. You stay here and barricade yourselves in.
What if you don't find her?
If I'm not back by sundown, leave without me.
Are you crazy?
No, I mean it.
Finally, Sandra forgets she's in a horror movie and decides to call for help. But it's too late because the phone lines are cut by some crazy locals. Apparently, the townsfolk blame Vince for the recent dog attacks just like they blamed his father all those years ago.
This here's the bullet that will pierce Vince Roberts' heart.
They show up at the house brandishing rifles and asking for Vince. Also, they laugh a lot.
Good, Sonny. That sure is good to know.
Like a bunch of idiots, the crew lets the heavily armed men into the house to wait for Vince. And surprise, the crazy guys spurn their hospitality and take everyone hostage.
When Vince gets back, I'm gonna shoot him right through the heart with this silver bullet. That's how you kill werewolves.
Meanwhile, Vince finds Angela and the two return to the house. But instead of shooting Vince, Angela gets a silver bullet. Next, we get a cat and mouse chase through what we're still supposed to believe is a house. One of the locals is left behind to kill the crew, but after he does some supervillain style monologuing, he's neutralized with a fireplace tool. Vince, having the advantage of knowing the layout of the house, picks off the locals one by one, even blowing one's head off. This is why people love bad movies. It's not often that something that would normally make you recoil in disgust, like the top of someone's head being blown off, can make you spit your drink out laughing. It's the power of bad special effects. Now things kick into high gear as those cute dogs show up to maul one of the crew, someone catches on fire, more dogs show up, hey, it's the Bumpus Hounds, and even the monster dog himself pops in for a bite to eat. The two remaining crew members hide in a bathroom and are eventually rescued by Vince. Then they grab some shut-eye. When Sandra wakes up, Vince is gone. Downstairs, she finds him dramatically backlit, hanging with the dogs. With the pooches off friendly for the time being, the three make a run for it. But when they try to start the car, they find there's no keys in it, because why would there be? So they have to go back for the keys, leaving Mary Lou all alone because...
You'll be safe enough locked in here.
Turns out the main bad guy is still alive, but only long enough for a jump scare before Sandra finishes him off. Back in the car, to absolutely no one's surprise, Mary Lou is dead and a monster dog emerges from the back seat because horror movie logic. While Vince is being chewed on, Sandra jumps out of the car. On her way to find Vince, she runs into the dirty old man and he's as handsy as ever.
Now he's taken my place, and his blood is as tainted as mine.
When Sandra finally catches up with Vince, we get our long-awaited transformation scene. As he's turning into a monster dog or werewolf or whatever, he begs her to shoot him. But the filmmakers can't let us leave on that note, so they lighten the mood with a curtain call of that catchy pop track from the beginning. And as if to prove to us that this was actually a movie and not a fever dream, they provide us with some helpful flashbacks. That song is not one of Alice Cooper's brightest moments, but the earworm in your head will make you think otherwise. Monster Dog is an Italian horror movie shot in Spain featuring an American rock star. Watching the movie, it's easy to tell that for the English-speaking version, the dialogue was dubbed. That makes sense since most of the cast was Spanish. What makes less sense is that they also use an English-speaking actor to dub Alice Cooper's lines. In fact, the only time he hears real voices during the two songs he performs. And speaking of those songs, both were indeed written by Alice Cooper specifically for this movie. If you like them, you can find them both on his 1999 box set, The Life and Crimes of Alice Cooper. Now, it's natural to wonder why a rock star like Alice Cooper would do a movie like this in the first place. While it's been reported that he originally signed on as a way to get back to work after a stint in rehab, he's also made it very clear that he didn't want to do a big budget movie. He wanted to make a sleazy, low budget, straight to video type of horror film. And to this day, he maintains that while he thinks the movie is awful, it's exactly the type of movie he tends to rent. The other big stars of the movie were, of course, the dogs, and if they didn't seem all that ferocious, it's because they weren't. They were reportedly guide dogs borrowed from a nearby school for the blind, and to get them to attack and chase the actors, the filmmakers deprived them of food. Not cool. So Monster Dog, is it watchable? Nah, while I do have an affection for this movie, I can't exactly recommend it. It's not painful to watch, but it's also not as fun as a so bad it's good movie should be. It does have its moments that keep it from being totally unwatchable, but they're few and far between, and the between is too often filled with nonsensical dialogue and irrelevant tangents. It would be a stretch to call the plot complicated. The movie's not smart enough to be complicated, but it's also not smart enough to coherently tell its story either. Instead, forcing us to play detective by connecting its haphazardly placed dots, which is a shame because those dots really only form a straight line. Maybe the only real reason to see this film is Alice Cooper, and that's only if you're a fan. Otherwise, catch it on TV, or not, it really doesn't matter. Well, that's a wrap, but be sure to join me next time when I take a look at the 1956 British film, Fire Maidens from Outer Space. And do me a solid, subscribe.